Well, good afternoon and welcome to another in our Wednesday webinar series live from the campus of CSU Bakersfield. I'm Kelly Bearden, I'm the director of the SPDC, and we're here for another one of our webinars. So welcome. I think we have an exciting topic again, a nice cutting edge topic. We've talked a little bit in the past about a little of the lean startup phenomenon that's going over the country. We're applying it for our lean small business startup. And today we're going to be talking about that and also some customer development tips. So welcome, glad to have you on board. As usual, we have a number of our audio sites that are remote sites that are on board. So I'd like to welcome them, a number of those sites from throughout Inyo County, and we also have some areas in the Kern River Valley and the Fraser Park area. So welcome. Today, our panelist, our presenter, is going to be Angel Cottrell. I'll introduce her in a second. Welcome again to the webinar viewing sites from around and all others who are joining us on your PC, Mac, or whatever tablet device, whatever you want to join. Welcome. We're going to have a poll question today, so please be ready to do that. We're going to gauge your interest and find out what's going on. If you have a question, please use the chat or question button, and that question will come to us, and we will then see when it is appropriate to answer that, and Angel will answer that at the time. Also, please, at the end of the webinar, stay on and complete the survey. It's only 4 or 5 questions, and please give us feedback on how we can better the webinar series. And of course, one way would be to somehow make this screen disappear. So just a little bit about our webinar series. We're all here to learn. We're not instructors. We're not going to instruct, but we're going to hopefully enlighten some discussion on a very valuable topic, and that's the lean small business startup discovery and finding out more about your customers. We take no credit for the lean small business. Lean small business has a phenomenon that's been going through a number of authors and other means. It's been a beneficial tool at the SPDC in working with startups. It's something that we just started doing this year in 2014. Startup businesses, we've been taking them through this methodology and using the lean canvas and going that route, rather than having them go through the process of writing a full-fledged business plan. And you'll find out why later on. So a lot of the intelligent work here, it's not done by us, the slides, images, technologies. So there's our disclaimer. Real quick about SPDC Services, I mentioned that we have been working with startups. Probably about 40% of the people we see are wanting to start a business. So there's no fee for our business one-on-one free business consulting. We do our webinars. In September, we're going to start a class in the middle part of September on the Kaufman Fast Track, which is a comprehensive class for startup business people and also existing business owners who want to get some comprehensive business skills that what they can apply in their business. And the 10-week class will actually first be taught here in Bakersfield, and we'll see about moving that to other areas as we do that. So with no further ado, let me introduce Angel Cottrell. Angel is with the CSU Bakersfield School of Business and Public Administration. She works doing a lot of outreach and a lot of other business services within that. She works at the Bakersfield campus, but does also a lot of work at the Antelope Valley campus and is doing lots of things to bring exciting topics. Another exciting plus for us at the SPDC is she is one of our SPDC consultants, one of 20, and is available to talk to after this on a scheduled basis. So welcome, Angel. Welcome to all you out there, and let's get this show on the road.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate the introduction. And so what we're going to go through really quickly is the origin of the Lean Business Startup. We'll talk a little bit about giving a small introduction into the Lean Small Business Startup, how we're adapting this to the SPDC, and then we're going to get into some customer development. So because these topics are as new as they are, we are doing a little bit of a refresher. And the first thing that I want to do is find out who's in the room. So let's launch our first poll. And what this is going to do, it's asking you to let us know, what do you know about lean customer development? What have you heard about this topic? So our poll has just launched, and you should be able to vote on this right now. We've got folks are voting right this second online. We've got, here we go, about 45% haven't heard much about the lean customer development. Actually, that's just raised to 55%, and about 30% of you know a little bit, and 8% have actually read a book or had some online content.
Yeah, Angel, that looks like half of the people are going to learn for the first time about the lean customer development startup. And about a quarter know a little bit about, and the rest of you are a little bit more engaged in it. So that's good to know.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll at this time. And let's get right into it. So this is a methodology change that is a potential movement that's happening within our country. This is a set of practices to help startups succeed. But here at the SPDC, we are not just focused on startups. We also consider this to be a way for you to really evaluate a growth strategy that you may consider implementing in your business. And so not only are our consultants working with startup businesses to go through what we call the 9 building blocks, and I will review those in a few minutes as well. But we're doing this with existing business owners to take a look at a growth strategy. And so where did some of these ideas come from? Well, Eric Ries is largely credited with the Lean Startup, and he's got a great book out there that explains this more. He actually took a course from Steve Blank, and Steve Blank is an entrepreneurship professor at Stanford University. He'll describe himself as a serial entrepreneur who's opened more than 8 businesses. And so Eric took a course from Steve, and then that is how he developed the Lean Startup. So our ideas are coming from these guys, as well as Mara. He's also a practitioner that is dealing with how to do lean in practice. And finally, we've also had the business model generator, which is another way, which is sort of the pre-startup information of searching for this business model. And we're going to get a little bit more into that today, because that's part of where this customer development truly fits in. So the Lean Startup itself, and we've talked about this in our last session, but the main idea is to get to a scalable business model. And we will discuss the difference between a scalable business model and how we actually see many of the businesses that we serve within our Small Business Development Center. But what it does is we're going to be talking also about pivoting and iterations, and how startups can determine whether or not they are scalable, and how you transition into becoming a larger company. So a scalable startup is defined as a startup that takes an innovative idea and searches for a scalable and repeatable business model so that it can become huge, okay? It usually does this by entering a very large market. Many of you have seen this happen, particularly with technology businesses, okay? So you're thinking, well, why the heck is the SPDC so concerned about this? And we're going to tell you why here in just a second. But as you're searching for these different models, this search is what is called customer development. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So different startups have different types of goals. A traditional startup, and again, this is actually works with our small business development centers. We find a proper business model. We utilize some of our initial sessions to help you determine some of the business model. And as well as some of this customer development will also help you do that. And you start to determine what level of profitability are you looking for in your business, and how do you define that success in your business. Scalable startups are considered to have a total available market of more than $500 million. And we know that that's not necessarily the market size or case for many of the businesses that we work with. And so what we've done is we've tailored this for small business development centers. And so we emphasize, and I want you in every area in this presentation, when we either speak about or you see the word product, I also want you to be thinking about service, because many of you have service businesses, and this applies directly to your service business. You're going to learn directly from your customers and not guess. And today, we are going to give you some tips on how to actually do this and how this is being done successfully. The model has to make money. Okay, because remember, we are not implementing our hobby. Okay, what we want to do is actually create a business that makes money. Now, it is up to you as the entrepreneur and as the small business owner to determine what level makes that business feasible for you and successful for you, so you can take it to the appropriate level. So again, the SPDC will work to help you find your business model. We're going to work to help you find your product and your service market fit. We all know that these market segments are very, very large. We've talked with you on many different occasions about differentiating yourself and finding a niche, and where is the place that you best fit within that large market, and who are those customers that are actually dying to have you open this business. They've got a problem that needs to be solved, and it's your business or your service that's going to actually solve that problem for them. You're going to be able to grow this business by developing intense and wonderful relationships by utilizing this customer development model, and the model will be able to be a repeatable sales model as well. So we all start with the big idea, okay? We start with the idea, and you begin to build on this idea, and through building the idea emerges your product or your service. And then you're going to go out and actually measure whether this product or service meets the need that you designed it to meet. And that's going to give you data. And you're going to take this data, and from the data, you learn. And as you learn from this data, and you are able to then make the adjustment to the idea so that you build out the proper product and service that will actually enter the marketplace. So this is what this is. This becomes a circular method of learning versus a linear method of learning. And I'm going to show you in a couple of slides, the traditional way that products or services have been rolled out is very linear. And customer development says, hey, you're not going to get it right the first time, but you're going to bring your ideas to the table. We're going to build on them. You're going to produce a product or service, and then we got to get out there and measure whether or not this is actually going to work and build and learn from there. And thus is what's called iteration. So, no business plan survives the first customer contact. This is really the premise behind customer development and the importance of doing this. And this is what is shaking up the way that we're doing consulting at the Small Business Development Center. Because any of you that has been involved with the Small Business Development Center for any period of time knows that we like our business plans, right? So this has got to be something pretty cutting edge for us to be saying, hey, let's slow down on the business plan for a second, and let's take a look at what's another way that we can actually help you build and design and produce a product or bring a service to market that's going to be successful for you and solve a problem for your customer. As a reminder, a startup is not a smaller version of a large company. What is it? According to Steve Blank, it's a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. Okay, so you will not remain a startup forever. That's why this is called temporary. If you remain a startup forever, then you've never advanced into actually launching your business. So what is the business model? We talk about trying to find a repeatable and scalable business model. It's a concept that's simple, relevant, and understandable. Okay. When we did the Lean Startup a couple of months ago, we talked about these 9 blocks that cover 4 areas. You've got customers, an opportunity, the problems and solutions, and financial viability. This is where the channels come into play. This is where determining what your customer segment is. What is the unique value proposition? What unfair advantage do you bring? What are the key metrics? Again, what's the problem and how are you solving this? What's your cost structure and where do your revenue streams come from? This comes from the place of doing those building blocks in a 30 to 45 minute session with your SPDC consultant to make some of these determinations. And we start to talk about, again, How does this get built out? And you see that this, from the business model, you start to get to customer discovery as well as customer validation. You come to the table with your idea and the size of the opportunity that you think it has the capacity to grow to. You also come with the size of the opportunity that you need it to have the capacity to grow to. That becomes your survival. This is how you hire employees. This is how you have decided that you are going to have a successful small business, okay? But these things are all in theory. All right. And these theories start to lead you to determining the model of business that you are going to have. And when you start to practice this, you've got to get into customer discovery as well as customer validation to determine whether your theories have any place in this world at all. I found this slide to be very important because this speaks directly to what customer development is talking about. More startups fail from a lack of customers than from a failure of product or service development. You need to focus on the who more than the what. Okay, so I want you to really get this imprinted in your brain. We need to be focusing on the who more than the what in this stage of business. In customer discovery and in customer validation is where you are searching for your business model. This is called iteration. It means that you keep searching, you stop, again, build, measure, learn, okay? What is the information that you are finding out about? How is this information fitting into one another? The execution piece is actually creating your customers and scaling your company. That becomes the growth of the product or the service. But right now, when we're dealing with customer discovery and validation, you're actually searching for the right model that will automatically create customers for you and scale this company. If you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned the fact that things were more linear. So this is a traditional product introduction. And again, I want you to think about service. And what happens is that when launches happen, they happen under assumptions. And there are two main assumptions that make a product or a service launch occur. And that is that the business thinks that they know what the customer problem is, and they think that they have figured out the features. And so what this shows you is that, again, in your head, you've got that idea. So they just go full bore, develop the entire product, develop the entire service, whatever that is out. They do a beta test, your alpha beta test, pardon me, to make sure that, does it work? That's pretty much what they're looking for. Again, they're focusing on the what, not on the who. Does it work? And they launch. And it's upon launch that 90% of the time failure occurs because they never went back to figure out, does this concept actually solve a problem? Did they actually go to any known or potential customer and find out? They just worked off of their assumptions. And the reason that this is important to look at is because this is where customer development flips everything around on your head. Because that is what has been known. Pardon me, let me go back a slide. See, we come back to this circular, okay? We will get to pivot, I promise you. But in this customer discovery and in this customer validation phase, this is where you are actually doing you've got your idea, build, measure, learn, and you're bringing this out to folks to find out if it actually is solving that problem. And as you get information, you stop before you move ahead, and you then go back through the process and make the adjustments to the product or the service based on the information that you have gotten. You are not creating customers yet. You are not building the company yet. You're not there yet. So what happens in this customer discovery period of time? You stop selling and you start listening, okay? You test the hypothesis with people. You are in a phase of continuous discovery You get yourself primed to a point that you know that you're not going to find capital the answer. Okay? That is not where you are right now. You are on a mission to seek and to gather information that's going to help you make these adjustments in real time. Depending on how often you are doing this and how often you're getting to your customers, you could be adjusting this stuff daily, if not weekly right now, okay? And this has to be done by the leadership of the company, okay? They use the word founder. If you're the owner, if you're the entrepreneur who's ever got the big idea, you need to be involved in this process. This is not something that can be farmed out to your staff, okay? And that is actually one of the errors that can happen. So I'm going to keep hammering this. Customer discovery. You've got the business model canvas. We've got those 9 blocks. So you've got these different ideas and you've handled this. Yes. Okay. We want to extract a hypothesis from this, and we're going to test a problem. And as well as we're going to test a solution. And then we can pivot or proceed, which is what you're trying to figure out. So this is what I was just talking with you about. Do you pivot or do you proceed? Okay, so we're not going to be a bull in a china shop and just go completely forward because you've decided in your head that this is the best idea or this is the best way to do it. We're actually going to pay attention to the information that you get from the potential customers. And we're going to give you actual specific examples as we get further down the line here. Once you get validation, this is when you get ready to sell and sell, and position and pivot or proceed, okay? And we will definitely have some future webinars on this piece of this, but I want you to know at some point you are going to want to sell this product or service. But today we're staying real tight in with customer discovery. So the pivot is the heart of customer development. It's iteration without crisis. It's fast, agile, and opportunistic. And why is this iteration without crisis important? Because normally if we go back, and I want you to remember, and quickly we're going to go back and look here. Remember this? Remember the linear? It doesn't allow for any type of pivoting or iteration. If at any point in the game you stop, it's considered failure at this point, utter failure, okay? And the whole mission to launch could be ended in that moment. That's not what you're going for. You actually are going to find out that you're going to find out things that you didn't know, and you're going to make adjustments, and you're still early enough in the game that you can make these adjustments without losing all of your capital, without losing everything. A pivot is a structural course correction. It tests new fundamental hypotheses about a product or a service strategy and your engine of growth. It's not failure. You pivot until you actually figure out that you can prove that the business model is going to work. This is good. This is considered success. In the old way of thinking, you would have failed. So this is what most people think. They think you're driving down one road and you're either going to make it or you're going to fail. And what customer development is actually talking about in this whole lean startup is talking about is that, guess what? You think you know where you're going on the road, and nope, you're going to find out other information that's going to change that. You're going to find out more information, and you keep, and they call them failures, until you get to the winning point. Okay, so you don't stop at the first pushback. The first pushback is information. So now, what the heck is customer development? It means, first of all, getting out of the office and finding out what your customer wants. It's a specific interview format to get information so that you know whether you're going to proceed and adjust or persevere. It's learning from feedback that you need to change your idea or you need to change the model and pivot. And Kelly, I think that you've got actually an example. And before we get into the flaws, let's talk a little bit about some of the examples that you have with customer development.
Well, thank you, Angel. One of the things, and I was fortunate enough to attend a conference on this, through a scholarship for Intuit, and a lot of large companies are into this. It's mostly startup businesses, but there are a lot of larger companies that have taken the lean principles and ran with them. One of them is Intuit. Intuit is a software company in the Silicon Valley. You know them for their QuickBooks and TurboTax product. But they do a lot when they introduce new products. They do a lot of the lean principles and act like a startup small business when doing so. And one of the things that they came up with is a customer discussion guide. And the customer discussion guide gives you not a script, but a kind of outline for going out and doing the interviewing process. One of the things that we do with customer development is we think about, let's develop customers. Let's go out there and develop customers. You know, when we talk about a lot of things that we've done in the past, such as market research firms, and market research firms are great at predicting the past. But is that going to help us in the future? What's going to help us is having a customer base when we get up and going that is going to be interested and buy our product because we come out with the product that they want to buy. So with the Small Business Development Center, I've mentioned we have used this, and we'll get into some of our examples of this. But first, let's talk a little bit about Intuit and what they look at. The Intuit uses a pretty formalized, they want to engage the customer in storytelling. So what they're doing is they're sitting down with them for a 1 hour period and asking them a number of questions on how they could figure out how best to sell their products to them. We're not looking at market research. We're not looking at customer share. We're looking at things that are going to help us in the future and not the past. So they also use open-ended questions they use a very personal approach. Some of our clients, not as personal as this in some of the best practices that we've seen. Remember, the customer is the expert, and your goal is to learn from them. So when you're doing this customer discovery as part of the customer development phase, you are out there learning about what your customer wants to do with your product. So be insightful about what you hear and look for the realities versus the non-realities out there. So what they like to do is they like to have you go through a discussion for 5 minutes. They want you to get to know your customer in a personal way. Ask how their friends would describe them, for example, and what's a typical weekday weekend for you. A lot of us, when we look at that, we say, well, gee, I want to sell pizzas. How's that going to help me? But learning as much as you can about your customers and getting to know them is essential, at least in the Intuit way. And by the way, thank you again, Intuit. What you do is another thing. So what do you do? What's your biggest obstacles in achieving success? What's your approach and attitude toward work over the years? And then why does it matter? And it comes back to that. So that's basically an hour interview process. You know, they have 15 to 20 questions. You go out, if you listen to the Steve Blank way, you go interview about, 50 to 100 different customers. And then you find out a little bit about your customers and what they want. And is it really what you thought they wanted? And this is a process that can be done fairly quickly compared to putting out a business plan and working on it for 2 months and then coming back and realize you're not meeting your customers' goals. So how does it work with some of the small businesses we work with? One way is that, let's use the pizza example I just gave you. What you can do is you can construct a number of questions on pizza. Do you enjoy pizza? Here in the Bakersfield area, which area do you live? Because pizzas are pretty much neighborhood based rather than something that's going to be sold online or virtually. So you might want to ask questions on where you buy pizza, how often you buy, how much do you spend? And you're asking these potential customers. That you might want to ask what types of pizza. Do you like the combination, the pepperoni? Do you like, what size do you get? Do you order more than you generally purchase? Do you use coupons? Do you ever eat take and bake? Do you eat frozen pizza? Do you eat cold pizza? Is couponing a factor in your decision? Do you buy pizzas from Big Box? Is delivery such an option? Would you be able to utilize some recipes that maybe help you if you're, say, a take and bake in the summer? I'm going to be cooking your pizza on the barbecue. So these are all questions that you can go out and ask 20, 30, 40 different people, and you'll see a trend on what is available and what your customer is going to want to see. Lastly, one of the other best case practices is that we know our clients aren't going to go through a real structured 1 hour interview with 50 to 100 different people. And we pretty much know that. So we're looking also for best practices. And one of the better practices that I saw was done back in January when somebody just got onto Facebook, for example. And what they did was they asked a simple question. Hey, I'm thinking about opening a food truck. What are good locations and what kind of food would you like to see? And what entailed then was about 5 printed pages of discussion, over 150 responses from potential customers that are out there. Now, they are somewhat of a selected customer base because they have friended you in Facebook. So you do know, they know a little bit about you and a little bit what's out there, but still the feedback can be invaluable. And so going through that particular process and getting some great ideas and being able to use social media, use your friends in social media. So those are a few examples about how this customer development works as far as the nuts and bolts for small businesses.
Thank you, Kelly. So you just heard him that they used Facebook and got over 150 responses, some of them more valuable than others. You can always choose to expand then on that conversation. We know that, like Kelly just mentioned, that it's probably not feasible for many of you to be able to even interview 100 people within 5 to 10 weeks period of time. But that use of social media can help you broaden your reach in a quick way. And then you can actually pull from there who were even 5 to 10 of the customers that gave a more in-depth response, or perhaps they were friends of a friend. And so they're not as close to you. And so again, you're getting more objective information. But part of the way that we learn best sometimes is to know what not to do. Okay. And so what I'd like to go through with you right now are a few things and some flaws that can occur when doing the customer development process. So do not assume that you know what the customer wants, meaning do not assume that you know who they are. Do not assume that you know what they need, and do not assume that you already know how to sell to them. This information becomes extremely important again for the founder, okay? For the lead idea person in this business, because this is the stuff that's going to be a little bit difficult for you to hear. And if you send out your trusted employee to go find this information for you and bring it back to you, a lot of it is going to be things that you may not want to hear, okay? Do not assume you know all the features that a customer wants. So again, these are features or aspects. Don't think that just because you've come up with the greatest idea since sliced bread, doesn't mean that your customer is going to see it that way. And it doesn't mean that the things that you think hold the most appeal and are there created to solve the problem that you think the customer has, you may be right on, or you could be off base. And these customer development interviews gives you the opportunity to figure that out. Don't focus on the launch date. This goes back to, this is a circular process, not a linear process, all right? Many businesses, what happens is that a launch date is picked. So everybody's working up against this deadline. Now, if any of you know me, you know that I love deadlines, okay? I think that they're great. They're a great way to push out work and get things done and make decisions. However, in this particular situation, you could be working on a false deadline. Okay, or you could be working on a deadline that you've decided that everything has failed if you didn't make the deadline. And the actual failure was not in listening to what it is that the marketplace actually wanted you to deliver. Do not emphasize execution. Instead, right now, you are testing, learning in the iteration, the circular process of this. This comes back to build, measure, learn. You got an idea, you're going to build it, you're going to go out there and get some information, you're going to learn from that, you're going to measure, you've got data, you're going to go back, and it goes around and around until we find that perfect model that's going to work. Okay, this was probably one of my favorite ones to type because it's totally different than what we teach. Do not write a business plan. I can hardly believe I'm even saying this across the broadcast right now. That doesn't mean forever. It just means in this particular piece of the situation of where you're in your business right now, okay? The reason why is because a business plan is not allowing you for trial and error, and that's what you're trying to do right now, okay? What happens is that business plans get written, they're fabulous, you feel fantastic, you've gotten all of this information out on the paper, you can see the plan, you can see your success right in front of you. And what happens if that's not what they want? Then that becomes complete failure for you. That is not where we are in this process. Don't confuse traditional titles and job duties with a startup's needs, okay? Traditional titles and duties exist for companies that exist. You're not at that phase. Either that, or you may exist, but you are again trying to implement and you're testing a growth strategy to determine if the implementation and execution is the best choice, or do you pivot at this point? This is when you could decide that it's time to pivot. The business plan will come once you've done the model and it's time to go get some capital. Do not execute a sales and marketing plan. Don't fall into the trap of executing too early. You haven't finished your customer development yet. Now, this you particularly see a lot of times in a larger company. Again, this goes back to setting a launch date and everybody working up to this launch date. And so in working to the launch date, you get a lot of pre-sales, you get all this. So they're actually executing a sales and marketing strategy for a product and service that we don't even know if the marketplace wants it. That usually ends up with the firing of a VP of sales, okay? Prematurely. Do not prematurely scale based on the presumption of success. Again, this is where a business plan at this point in time could actually get you in trouble. So you could start scaling on something that is not necessarily a reality. Just because we can make those numbers work on paper doesn't mean that that's what's actually happening in real time in your business right now. And don't manage by crisis, because that's going to give you a death spiral. If you implement by the plan and the plan starts to fail, you just got information, okay? If it's not working out exactly the way that you thought it was going to, that is information. Information is not failure. That's an indication of success, all right? This is what you're trying to figure out. What does the marketplace want? What part of the market share are you going to be able to capture? Who are these customers going to be? So how do we begin about this? Well, we talked about doing one person at a time interviews. And again, for many of you, utilizing your social media may really be an effective way to also figure out who would be the best for you to schedule one-on-one interviews with. Since you may not have the time to do one-on-one interviews with 50 to 100 people, you could utilize social media to get the word out, and then you could schedule one-on-one interviews with those folks that really either showed an interest or folks that actually reflected back to you that they thought what you were doing maybe made no sense at all. And so you want to speak to the people that don't think that your idea has a place in the marketplace. That could be very helpful. You may not like what you're hearing, but it could be very helpful. You want to do this one person at a time because you want to avoid groupthink. Okay? People have a tendency to actually agree with one another and pile on the same idea. Know your goals and your questions ahead of time. So this is where you actually are doing some of your market research ahead of time. When we teach you about market research, we talk about you actually defining demographics. You know, what does that niche look like? Who's that specific market that you're trying to get? So you actually want to do that work that will help you refine who you're going to try to do this customer development with. And you want to have your questions prepared ahead of time. You need to separate the difference between getting what behavior is with people and what feedback is. Some of this along the behavior lines may feel like it sticks a little bit better with the product piece of it, but it's about asking about a user's behavior and mindset. So do they actually think that there's a problem that needs to be solved versus if you're showing them a product, them trying to give you feedback to try to help you adjust the usability and the functionality of the product. That's not necessarily completely what you're trying to get from this person right now. In some ways, you're trying to find out, would you actually use this service or this product at all? I've alluded to this a few times that you've got to get ready to hear what you don't want to hear. I keep reminding you, remember, build, measure, and learn. This is the learning part. If you only hear what you want to hear, then you've wasted everyone's time. Okay? So prepare yourself. Prepare yourself and then get excited when you do get those pats on the back and those folks that say, hey, you solved this problem, great. But be prepared to have a differing of opinion in terms of the product or the service that you're bringing to market. You've got to disarm politeness training, okay? You've got to disarm the political correctness, or you'll never get the truth from anybody. So what you want to do is ask for brutal honesty and let them know, hey, the worst case scenario for me is that I've put together a product or a service that people don't want. Okay? You need to depersonalize this. You don't want people to feel like if I say to you what I really think about this, that's going to hurt your feelings. People will not give you true feedback. And if you're in that place and zone, then it's not the time for you to be doing customer development. Okay? So we've got to have that thick skin on. Kelly talked about this quite a bit with Intuit. Always follow a yes or no question with an open-ended question. You're trying to get the details, people. The more that you've got the detailed information, the more that you will be able to have that information and the data so that you know what you're going to pivot on and what you're going to proceed on. So what do you need to move? Get back into that circular zone of build, measure, learn, and what's the part that you actually drive forward. You want to focus on actual behavior, not speculative feelings. So keep it factual about the product or service, not the what ifs. This is what you actually have right now. So you're not having this conversation about what's going to happen in the future. You want to have the conversation about what is the product and service that you have to offer right now, the way it is to the marketplace. You got to listen and not talk. Okay. So we've got that old saying, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. But the more that you can listen, what you need to do is hold the space. What's most likely going to happen is that there could be some awkward silence. Okay? Many people are not comfortable with awkward silence. Get used to it. Sit there. Wait it out. Let the customer fill the silence instead of you. Otherwise, you're just going to learn more about what you already know inside your head. Follow your nose and drill down. Keep your radar on. Keep asking why. Don't be rude about it, but you want to keep at it. As long as they keep talking and they're willing to give out more information, the more that you do those why questions, you're going to get more and more truthful information. Parrot back or misrepresent to confirm. I like to say reflect back as well. So just stop being so sure that you heard what you heard. Confirm. Okay? And sometimes you can say something completely opposite so that the person can catch it and say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I was trying to say to you. What I was trying to communicate was this. And then you're getting true communication. Kelly, can you help me here?
Sure.
You want to actually ask for introductions. So who else does this person know that they think would appreciate the opportunity to provide you this information? Many folks will see this as a positive opportunity, and be sure to write up your notes quickly, okay? You not necessarily remember that you're trying to have a conversation with this person. So feel free to take some notes in that, but if you literally are writing down everything word for word, it's going to stop that conversation. You know that when you sit down with someone, you go have coffee, most times you don't take notes. All right. So try to either write down 1 or 2 words so you've got trigger points. And then when this session has ended, write down your notes automatically or use your phone and do a voice recorder automatically. Again, some people like to record these sessions. Other people don't. There's mixed feelings about that. Some folks think recording the session for the first few minutes, people are uncomfortable and then they kind of forget and then they open up. Other folks find it to be a distraction. So that's something that you could test. You could pivot or proceed, right? Build, measure, learn. We can use this in all different areas. You want to look for patterns. Oh, look at this. The patterns are also the trends. You hear us talk about this in the Small Business Development Center all the time. Understanding what the trends are in your industry, understanding what the trends are happening locally, understand what the trends are in anything that you particularly care about that has to do with your business, okay? What are the patterns in these conversations? They're going to be very easy to pick up from the social media piece. Like Kelly had said, he had 150 replies to this particular Facebook piece. They could very, very quickly take a look at that and see what were the similarities in what people were saying and what were the differences in people were saying. It's these patterns that are going to actually direct you to pivot or proceed. I gave you this definition of the pivot again one more time. Okay, it's a actual structural course correction so that you are taking in that new information and it's fundamentally changing the hypothesis that you have based on this startup or the growth strategy that you are looking to implement. And Kelly, before we get to our manifesto, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, you use that fancy word hypothesis, and I just want people to know that, that's just your best guess. So what you're doing with this is you're building your best guess, and then you're going out and asking questions to see if your best guesses are right. If your best guesses are correct, proceed on. If your best guesses are wrong, then you come back to the pivot or actually do some tweaking until you get it right. So that was one thing I always like to add, because that's such a fancy word, that hypothesis.
We can get fancy here at the SPDC every now and again, folks.
But hey, I have a question that's sitting right here that needs to be answered. It's been sitting there for a while. Thank you for asking it. It says basically when people come to the SPDC and are counseled on the lean startup, the lean small business startup is what we call it, what is actually the process that you go through? And I know Angel kind of went over this, but this is a good opportunity to go through this process again and what actually happens right when they get there.
Well, what we want to do with you is to build out the business model canvas. And so one of the first things that we're going to do is talk with you about what do you think the problem is? So what need does your product or your service fill, or what does it solve? And we're going to ask you to list the top 3 problems as you see it, okay? And then we're going to want you to determine customer segments. These are large groups of target market customers, okay, within the entire market share. Again, we are not drilling down to what your niche is at this point. This is what is the overall market size? Where do you see market growth and potential? And what percentage of market share do you think that you can capture? Or what percentage of market share do you have to capture in order to be in business? Then we begin to discuss your UVP, which is your unique value proposition. And this is your clear and your compelling message that sets you I'm sorry, I've lost my words here for a second, but it sets you out from the rest of the group. Okay, so if you are opening a massage business, okay, we know that there's a lot of different massage businesses in different communities. So what is it about the way that you provide this service that makes it unique? And what is it that would draw customers to you? And that leads you to the solution, which is number 4. So again, back to what is it the problem that we think that we're going to solve? And then how do you actually are attempting to provide a solution in the marketplace? Then we go to channels. And that means where are you actually going to find these customers? In what ways are you going to reach them? How are you going to integrate these channels? So now this depends on the type of customer you're talking about. Business to business channels look different than a straight customer channel. Online is a different type of channel. So we start to look at how do we actually get the product and service to marketplace? And then we go to revenue streams. So what are your revenue streams? Where are the different ways that you are going to sell? Okay, so are there going to be usage fees or subscription fees? Is it individual pay? Where are your leads generated and how do you convert these leads? So where are all the potential different sources of revenue? Again, business to business, that could be another potential source of revenue, which then takes you into your cost structure. And really, this is a question that you have to answer. Are you more concerned about quantity or are you more concerned about quality? All right, it really does come down to these particular points. So in some ways, quality means it, and it doesn't mean that high quantity does not have quality with service or product. That is not what I'm saying. But when you are looking at cost structure, are you the luxurious massage that's $155 an hour? If so, what does that look like? How do you set yourself aside different from that? Or are you the $45 an hour massage? Okay. What are those different things? So what are you looking to do? And what customer base do you think that you've got the best chance of actually reaching? And then we start to go through key metrics. And so these are different quantitative and qualitative metrics that become very important. These are key partners. These are particular activities that are important. These are resources that you need to have. And so we define what those are. And then finally, we really want to take a look at what is your unfair advantage. This is related to the unique value proposition, but really it is a total advantage that is related directly to you. It's something that cannot be copied at all. Okay, so it has to do with me as an individual person. It has to do with resources that I'm personally connected to. So this has to do with really, truly, what do you bring to the table?
So that sounds complicated, huh? 9 boxes that you fill out. Actually, you'd be surprised. It's quite easily done. And we have the tools. If you go in and you see one of our consultants, such as Angel, she'll pop up a big foam board with a big canvas on it, and it is a canvas. It's 3 feet or so. She'll have a stack of yellow stickies, and she asks questions and who your customer segment is, and all of a sudden you start putting those on that board. You meet with her in 45 minutes, generally is what it takes to come up and fill that canvas out, and she'll gladly unclip it, fold it, and send it home with you. So it's actually a lot easier process than it actually sounds like, and all of a sudden you've done that to now begin doing the customer discovery and the interview process.
Okay, we're going to go through the last few steps here of the customer manifesto, and we've got about 4 minutes left, so I'd like to get some questions also in. If anyone's got some additional questions, now would be the time. So, what is your customer development manifesto? This comes straight out from Mr. Steve Blank. There are no facts inside of your building, so get outside. What does that mean? It means that we used to think that we could sit inside and think about all these great ideas and solve all these problems and then put it out into the marketplace and everybody would love it and buy it. Or it goes back to the old way of thinking of business owners saying, hey, I'm here, I've opened my doors, where is everybody? Okay, so what this is saying is don't stay in the building, get out. This is the number one thing that you do with customer development. Pair customer development with agile development. Agile development is the way in which you will be executing these strategies. We'll talk more about that in the future. Failure is part of the search for the business model, and if you're afraid to fail, you're destined to do so. So I know we keep using this word failure. I almost want us to come up with a new word on this because I don't think any of these things are failure. That really becomes the point, right? You're not failing, you're pivoting. You're doing an iteration to pivot, to then proceed, okay? We're testing. Iterations and pivots are driven by insight. You're going to get this insight from someone that's not inside of your brain, okay? All this information is not housed in there. That's why we're going outside to speak with people and to bring them in. Success begins with buy-in from the owner, investor, and partners. The bottom line is that this type of going through your business cannot be done if the founders, if the leadership is not bought in. Okay, so we've got to have the leadership bought into this, and they actually have to be an active participant in collecting this information, paying attention to this information. No business plan survives first contact with the customer, so we're going to wait a little while to write it. Validate your hypothesis with experiments, and not all startups are alike. So these hypotheses are these great guesses that you're putting forth. You could even do one of these experiments in one of the meetings that you have with customers. Now that could make that fun. Agree on the market type. It changes everything. We talked about this in the customer segments and where you are going to find the customers, what markets you're actually going after, what percentage of share you're going after, and why do you think that that's the place that you should be? Startup metrics are different from existing companies. We went over this some in the last presentation that we did in March. And the main takeaway on this is that it's pretty much impossible for a startup to have a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement. It's hard to measure any results on that because, again, you don't exist. Cash flow projections are just that, projections. Nothing wrong with your cash flow projections. Extremely important to do that. But those will not actually define the metrics of a startup. You want to know how fast you're going to burn cash. You want to know what it's going to cost you to get a customer. You want to know what it's going to cost you to convert a customer. You're going to know what it's going to cost you to retain one. Track the progress. We're down to the last minute of converting all of your hypothesis into facts and how that's working for you. Fast, fearless decision-making, cycle time, and speed are valuable. This goes back to the circular process of pivoting and proceeding. These are not failures. You will build, measure, learn, and adjust. Based on the data that you have, that idea and the hypothesis will change. You've got to have passion. We already talked about startup titles and functions being different. Preserve your cash while searching. Once we have figured out the business model, that's when you start to spend. Communicate and share the learning, particularly with your team. And startups demand comfort and chaos with uncertainty. You've got to get used to the unknown. Be comfortable being uncomfortable in your own skin. I want to thank you today for joining us for CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center Webinar Wednesday. You can reach Kelly Bearden and his staff at 654-2856, or please check us out on the web at www.csub.edu/SPDC. Jordan's been updating that website, so be sure to check it out. It looks fantastic. We'll see you all again next month. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Goodbye now.